Good morning, everyone. We want to welcome you to the Kentucky School of Alcohol and Other Drug Studies virtual learning series, which is sponsored by the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. My name is Camille Kroick. I am the Cannabis Prevention Enhancement Specialist with the Kentucky Division of Substance Use Disorder Prevention and Promotion Branch, and I will be one of your hosts today. And my co-host is Tara, which I will allow her to introduce herself now.
Hello, my name is Tara Ruckert, and I am the Nicotine Prevention Enhancement Specialist, also with the Prevention and Promotion Branch of the Division of Substance Use Disorder.
Just some housekeeping things for this morning. This session is a webinar. All attendees are muted and videos are turned off. We do ask that you use the question and answer box for presenter questions. We have American Sign Language interpreters that will be on screen throughout the session. And we do appreciate your patience and any grace that you can offer us for any technical difficulties that we might experience this morning. And this session is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our website. To be eligible for CEUs or certificate of attendance, attendees must be present for at least 90% of the session, and Zoom will track our minutes for us, so you don't necessarily need to be worried about that. You do not need to enter your contact information into the chat, but we ask that you use the same email to register and to log into each learning session. You will receive an email following today's training with instructions on how to access the online CEU system. We also want to make note that certificates will be available after December the 20th. So on today's agenda, we have Dr. Elena Tackett, who is going to speak to us on the youth use of emergent products, vapes, flavors, and oral nicotine. And at the end of the session today, we will talk about the upcoming Kentucky school training sessions. Dr. Tackett is a pediatric psychologist and assistant professor at the Center for Tobacco Research at The Ohio State University. She researches the respiratory and health effects associated with nicotine product use among youth and young adults. She received her doctorate from Oklahoma State University and completed her psychology residency and postdoctoral fellowship at the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown University and the TSET Health Promotion Research Center. Her work has been published in peer-reviewed scientific journals and has been continuously funded by the National Institute on Health since 2017. Currently, she has an NIH-funded project which will examine how synthetic cooling agents added to e-cigarettes impacts the toxicant exposure and health of young adults who currently use e-cigarettes. And with that, we are going to turn it over to Dr. Tackett.
Okay, so I'm gonna screen share here. Presentation. Let's see. Make this big. Okay, no one should be seeing my slides or my notes. So thank you for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here. We have a lot to cover, so I'm gonna jump right into it. First, I want to highlight disclosures and conflicts of interest. So all of, or many of the research data reported in this presentation are supported by the National Institutes of Health or the American Heart Association. I do want to say that the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are mine and do not necessarily represent the official position of The Ohio State University, the NIH, or the FDA, and I have no conflicts of interest to report. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about what is tobacco regulatory science, right? This is where the primary focus of my research has been on. So I'd like to give a little foundation for all of us to have a jumping point. We're going to talk about what it is and how it helps prevention and cessation efforts. And then I'm going to talk about some data on youth and young adult use of e-cigarettes, different flavors of e-cigarettes, how synthetic cooling agents and other coolants impact user behavior, and then oral nicotine products. And then we'll talk about some resources and ongoing research. So a little bit about me. I like people to know, who I am, and given that this is for Kentucky, I like to say that I am a native Kentuckian. So I was Born and raised in Boyd County, Kentucky, I graduated from Boyd County High School in 2005. I then got my undergraduate degree from Northern Kentucky University, and I took some time off in between my undergraduate degree and my graduate degree working at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. This was a really formative time for me. I learned what it was like to work on NIH-funded research and really develop my passion for research there. I went to Oklahoma State University and I worked at the Children's Hospital Center at OU Medical School under the mentorship of Dr. Ted Wagner and Dr. Larry Mullins. Then I was at Brown University from 2016 to 2018 under the mentorship of Dr. Elizabeth McQuaid, really focusing on understanding the effects of e-cigarette use among youth with asthma. I finished up my postdoctoral fellowship, and my first year of my faculty position was at the TSET Health Promotion Research Center, where I continued my training and work in tobacco regulatory science. I recently was at the University of Southern California Tobacco Center for Regulatory Science, where I further developed some training and got really great mentorship there. And now here I am at The Ohio State, and I'm really excited to be a part of the Center for Tobacco Research here. All right, so what is tobacco regulatory science? Well, and I'm just gonna move the faces here so I can see my notes. So the Family Smoking and Prevention Tobacco Control Act is a federal statute in the United States that was signed into law in 2009. This act gives the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, the power to regulate the tobacco industry. This act restricts tobacco marketing and sales to youth, requires smokeless tobacco product warning labels, ensures modified risk claims are supported by scientific evidence, and requires disclosure of ingredients in tobacco products. Now, where I really got involved with tobacco regulatory science is around 2012. But in 2016, the deeming rule came about. And so this authority allowed the FDA to include all tobacco products under this regulatory umbrella, including e-cigarettes. And so the goal of this really is the FDA Center for Tobacco Product has been able to fund research projects addressing these newly deemed tobacco products through a variety of mechanisms, including the partnership with the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program and the National Institutes of Health. And the type of research that we conduct under this umbrella is really intended to protect public health by a couple of different things, right? We want to reduce the number of people who start to use tobacco and nicotine products. We want to encourage more people to stop using these products. And we want to really reduce the adverse health impact and understand what is the health impact for those who continue to use these products. Some example questions that we can answer with tobacco regulatory science, and I have in brackets here e-cigarettes and nicotine pouches because that's where I primarily conduct my research. But you know, how are e-cigarettes and nicotine pouches used? Do these products help smokers quit? Will they keep smokers hooked on nicotine? What are the downstream health effects of product use, right? Do we have respiratory, cardiovascular, or cancer risk associated with this use? And how might these use behaviors change under different scenarios, right? If increased taxes on cigarettes happen, how does that change use behavior with e-cigarettes or oral nicotine products? If e-cigarette flavors are removed, what happens with user behavior in the context of e-cigarettes or oral nicotine pouches? Okay. So currently, there are 7 centers for regulatory science in the United States. These centers were recently identified and funded this past year. So I'm here at Ohio State. University of Kentucky also was awarded a center. So this kind of just gives you an idea of, you know, where these centers are and where they're functioning. And the goal of the T-Course 3.0 program really is to generate scientific evidence in 8 domains. So understand how tobacco product composition and design impacts health, user behavior, approaches to test the toxicity of non-cigarette tobacco smoke, aerosol, or specific constituents, examine the effects of tobacco product characteristics on addiction and abuse liability, the short and long-term health effects, how behaviors are related to product use, and understand how to more effectively communicate health messages, influences of tobacco marketing, and understand the impact of potential or actual FDA regulatory actions. So the goal of the Ohio State Center for Tobacco Regulatory Science, or the OSUT course, is called Flipping the Script. And it's really aimed at using the tobacco industry's nicotine playbook to maximize public health, seek to understand how the manipulations of nicotine and e-cigarettes, oral nicotine pouches, and the marketing of these products impact their appeal, addictiveness, use patterns, and toxicity. So I'm not affiliated with the Appalachian Tobacco Regulatory Science team, but I wanted people on the call to be aware that the University of Kentucky was awarded this, and this is the name of their T-Course program. All right, so let's get into it. Again, the goal of these next couple of slides are so that we all have a clear understanding when I talk about certain research products or different product characteristics, why it's important and what I'm referring to. And so what's typically in an e-cigarette device? I'm sure many of you on the call are familiar with this, but we have the battery here. We have a heating coil, an atomizer, the wick to soak up the e-liquid that typically includes propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, nicotine water, or other additives. And then we have a tank or some type of reservoir that holds the e-liquid inside. All of that works together to generate and produce aerosol in which the user inhales. And over the last 10 years, we've seen a wide evolution of different types of e-cigarette devices, as well as nicotine form. So back in the beginning, around 2012, when we really saw e-cigarettes emerge on the marketplace in the US, we had these cigalikes, right? And so these cigalikes were really developed to look like cigarettes as they sound. So they were shaped like them, but people really didn't like using them. They didn't deliver nicotine very effectively. They didn't really taste that good. And so we really didn't see a lot of uptake in this generation. In generation 2, here we have the battery pen. And so it's very similar to the device I just showed. You have a tank that holds the reservoir of the e-liquid, a battery that it attaches to, and then you just press a button and inhale the aerosol. These were more customizable, so you could add different types of e-liquid, different flavors, but really not a lot of individual personalization in these products. Then in around, I would say probably 2014, we saw the third generation emerge. And so these were much more customizable e-cigarettes where you have a much larger tank that can hold more e-liquid. And part of that was due to the modifiable or variable watts or voltages that you could do with these products. So the batteries were much more large. You could really personalize how hot it gets. Some were smart enough where you could increase the heat as you inhale. And then we were seeing these big generations of e-cigarette aerosol, right? So this is around the time when we're seeing things on YouTube like cloud chasing competitions and things like that. So we're generating a whole lot of aerosol. Before we go into the fourth generation here, I want to highlight these first 3 generations really were using free-base nicotine. And this is important because this is a more basic composition, basic as in pH, of the nicotine. And, so most of the e-liquid strengths range between, 3 milligrams to sometimes 18, sometimes 20. But really, it was all in this free-base form. Then during the 4th generation, we have the pod mods emerge. And this is around 2015. Part of the pod mod prevalence increase was likely associated with Juul. And so in 2015, Juul patented a nicotine salt formula and launched the Juul device soon after. And so what happens is the Juul manufacturers created a nicotine salt. And so by adding acids to the e-liquid, they made an aerosol that was more acidic less harsh, and could be more easily inhaled compared to previously available e-cigarette devices. So we didn't see any nicotine salts really in this generation. We see it here with this 4th generation. And so typically they have pods, as you see here in this graph. Some of the other devices, again, had different sizes of pods, but not a lot of you can't really modify this a lot, like the watts or the voltages. And again, this is where we really see the increase in use among youth, right, related to the nicotine salts. Now we're living in this kind of 5th generation, is what I call it. This 5th generation are typically disposable products, so they're all encompassed. You buy the device that includes the e-liquid, includes the flavor. They come in a wide variety of flavors. Some of these newer disposable ones are looking more like the 3rd generation, where you can modify the amount of power that goes to the device. You can take up to like 8,000, 10,000 puffs in one device, and then you throw the whole system away. One thing I didn't mention is, as I was going through these, we really saw a wide change in price and how much it costs to initiate using these products. So really the 2nd and 3rd generation, some of these 3rd generation devices could be 80, 100, $150, $200. Whereas here in the 4th generation, previously you could purchase a Juul, for relatively cheap. And now even the 5th generation, some of these disposables are, 8 to 10, sometimes less, dollars per device. And so to make matters even more complicated, we also have seen some evolution in addition to the nicotine form, right? We went from free-base nicotine to nicotine salts. Now we've seen evolution in the type of nicotine used in these products. And so the makers of Puff Bar, which the FDA ordered to stop selling flavored e-cigarette products in 2020, announced in 2021 that they were returning to the market with tobacco-free nicotine. The company claimed that the nicotine was crafted from a patent manufacturing process and not for tobacco. Some companies suggest that this is a pure manufacturing process and doesn't have the residual impurities of tobacco-derived nicotine. So really, nicotine exists in 2 stereoisomers. We have S-nicotine and R-nicotine. And part of what the OSU T-Cores will be doing is really understanding how these different 2 forms of nicotine and understanding, how tobacco-derived and synthetic nicotine are different. We've recently published a paper examining what young people think about, synthetic nicotine. And us and other colleagues and other researchers in the field have found that this tobacco-free, marketing claim really can alter intentions and perceptions of these products. And so some young people believe that tobacco-free means that there's no nicotine in it, which is not correct. Some believe that this is a safer product. So really, this is just highlighting that, these modifications and evolutions of these products really can impact consumer perceptions, particularly among young people. We've had evolutions in flavors. So, we have the different devices, we have the different nicotine forms, different nicotine types, and now we have all these different flavor combinations. And so Kruzman and colleagues developed this e-liquid flavor wheel really to try to identify some common terminology and a tool in which researchers could use these to have common survey language when we ask people, what type of flavor do you use? So for example, within desserts here, you see a wide variety of sweets, fruit. It can be even smaller categories of tropical citrus berries. And then within that, you have all the wide variations. And so this is just another example of kind of what makes it challenging to really understand the health implications of using e-cigarettes because we have all these wide variety of flavors and additives and things that are going into them. Another recently development related to e-cigarette flavors. So originally we just had the mint and menthol category, right? It included menthol, mint, peppermint, spearmint, wintergreen, those types of flavors. Well, now we're seeing companies introduce menthol and synthetic cooling agents or synthetic cooling agents instead of menthol. I bring this up because this is a new thing that we're seeing on the marketplace. The WS in the synthetic cooling agent stands for Wilkinson Sword. So these were originally developed to use in things like aftershave and things like that. And they are authorized for use in dermal and ingestion, but they have not been evaluated for inhalation. So we really don't know what's happening when people are inhaling these synthetic cooling agents. Another important characteristics of these synthetic cooling agents is that they are odorless. So unlike menthol, they do not provide what's called a characterizing flavor. And that's important in tobacco regulatory science because when we say, hey, you can't have characterizing flavors like strawberry in e-cigarettes, when you say strawberry, I know what that tastes like, right? I know what that sounds like. I know what that flavor is. But these synthetic cooling agents do not provide a minty flavor like menthol. They just provide a cooling sensation. And this is important because, research has shown that adding these cooling properties makes the e-cigarette aerosol and tobacco smoke easier to inhale. Thus allowing for people who are tobacco naive or haven't used combustible cigarettes in the future or in the past to use these products more easily. And there is evidence that, synthetic cooling agents could potentially be used as a replacement or an enhancer of menthol in e-cigarettes. So as many states consider, a menthol restriction, synthetic cooling agents may impact, the public policy and the public net benefit of that. Okay, so now I'm going to get into some specific data to show how all of these evolutions, alterations, and product changes are reflected in survey data and user behavior. So I do see that somebody has raised their hand, but I will answer questions at the end of the presentation if that's okay. All right, so these are data from the National Youth Tobacco Survey from 2012 to 2022. So here in purple, we have e-cigarettes. So that's really what I'm going to focus on because that's the main topic of today's presentation. And as you can see in 2012, we have about 1.5% of high schoolers using e-cigarettes at all in the past 30 days. And why this is important, right? If we're thinking back to our graph where I highlighted all the different generations of e-cigarettes, 2012 really was when we were seeing the cig-alike devices on the marketplace. So again, no one was, very, very low prevalence of e-cigarette use there. Then we see a larger increase in 2014. 2016 is really when kind of, Juul started becoming, and pod mods become more popular by unit sales. And then in 2018, we see almost 21% of youth had used had used e-cigarettes in the last 30 days. We see a slight drop off in 2020 and then again in 2022. I do want to highlight that we've done, as a public health community, we've done a great job in reducing use of cigarettes across the years among young people. So in 2012, it was about 16%, and then in 2022, we have it down to about 2%. How does Kentucky stack up to the national data? Well, these are data from the Kentucky Incentives for Prevention that I reviewed. And so in 2012, it looks like, e-cigarettes weren't included on the survey, but in 2014, we see about 10%, almost 11% of any past 30-day use among 10th graders. Drops a little bit in 2016, similar to the national data, increases in 2018, and then we see a little bit of a drop off in 2021. Okay, so now I'm going to get into some specific studies that were really focused on addressing some of those research questions, right? As we're talking about the different nicotine forms and e-cigarette products, that's kind of what I want you to keep in your mind as I talk about each one of these studies. And so really the research question of this study was to examine if nicotine dependence varied by the type of e-cigarette device used among youth. So this is a convenient sample of youth collected in 2019 between the ages of 13 and 17 years. So they were on average about 16 years old. It was a mostly female sample, and they were mostly high schoolers. The online survey was conducted between April and May in 2019. Most young users were using Juul. So about 87 of our youth were using Juul, 42 were using another type of pod mod, and 56 were using another type of e-cigarette. And here we're classifying another type of e-cigarette as like a tank or a mod. So think about the second and third generation devices. So to measure nicotine dependence, we use the Hooked on Nicotine checklist, or the HONK. So this is a 10-item questionnaire, yes, no responses, and higher scores are indicative of more nicotine dependence or a greater loss of autonomy. So what we see here on the left, we have the level of nicotine dependence. We have the specific type of e-cigarette used on the bottom. So we have Juul, pod mod, a tanker mod, and we have our dual user group here. So this is categorically people who are using any type of e-cigarette as well as combustible cigarettes. And across the board, compared to people who were using tanks or mods, we see that users of Juul or pod mods had significantly higher nicotine dependence. We see this is also the same for our dual users. So I want to orient you to this graph. So I thought it would be helpful to show each item individually. So on the left part here on the y-axis, we have the percent endorsed by each participant. So the number of people who endorsed each item, yes to that answer. And then again, we have Juul in gray, pod mod in green, and another type of e-cigarette, so the tank or the mod in the red. And across each of these 8 items, we see that there are statistically significant differences between people who are using Juul and pod mods compared to other types of e-cigarettes. And these are items asking about, how addicted do you feel like you're addicted to your e-cigarette? Do you have strong cravings? Do you use your e-cigarette because you feel like you really need it? Do you vape or use your product in places where it's not allowed? Do you find it's hard to concentrate when you can't use your e-cigarette? Are you irritable, or do you have a strong urge when you can't use your e-cigarette? Are you nervous, restless, or anxious? So these are all really important characteristics in understanding adolescent nicotine dependence. And so we did see that symptoms significantly differed by device for 8 out of the 10 symptoms. And the only 2 items that didn't differ, which I think is really interesting here, were related to quit attempts. So have you ever tried to quit your e-cigarette but couldn't? Did you use an e-cigarette now because it's really hard to quit? Now, the majority of respondents answered no to these questions. And I started thinking, is this because they're not interested in quitting? Is it because they don't have access to, cessation? Is it because we need cessation, prevention or cessation models or programs that are really specific to e-cigarettes, right? Like, should we be developing something that's e-cigarette specific rather than taking combustible cigarette cessation efforts and using those for e-cigarettes? And, I'll talk about resources and programs a little later in this presentation, but in a follow-up study among adults, we found that 42% wanted to quit e-cigarettes because of health concerns. Almost 60% tried to quit without support, and 53% reported that stress was the main trigger for using their e-cigarette. Now, how do flavors impact user behavior? So I'm trying to hit the high points here, and so I want to be thoughtful of time because we do have a lot to cover. But this is a study that I was really excited about because we really wanted to examine the effects of exposure to e-cigarettes with or without the synthetic cooling agent or menthol on user appeal sensory attributes, as well as how base flavors, right, like fruit or tobacco, impact perceptions and appeal of these products. Appeal and sensory attributes are really important characteristics in understanding, willingness to use again? Are people, if people find products appealing, are they then more likely to use? And so because we know so little about these cooling agents and how they compare to menthol, this is a really exciting foundational study. So this is among adult users who were either exclusive cigarette users, or dual users. So they use both cigarettes and e-cigarettes. So this is a visual of the study design. And so we have the base flavor on the left, where we analyzed, we provided participants bold tobacco, mango, or wintergreen in nicotine strength of 2% or 4%. So these are all nicotine salts. We had them as they are, right, without any cooling agent, with menthol added, and then with WS-23 added. Participants then take a puff, and then after they try the product, they ask, what did you think about it? How much did you like it? How smooth was it? How cool was it? This was a double-blind study, and so participants did not know the flavor in which they were trying, and the research staff did not know what flavor the participants were trying. And so what do we find? Well, menthol compared to no coolant, we found that products with menthol in them, people were more likely to endorse willing to use them again. WS-23, so the synthetic cooling agent versus no coolant, we found that across the board, people liked it more, they disliked it less, and they were willing to use it again. These are the same data I just presented in the table, but in visual format. I really like visual formats. I think it's helpful to understand data. So in yellow, we have the no cooling agent. In blue, we have the menthol. And in gray, we have the synthetic cooling agent. And so as you can see here, liking, disliking, and use again for the synthetic cooling agent was higher than or lower for disliking compared to the no cooling agent. So these are the sensory attribute outcomes. So people rated how sweet was it, how smooth was it, how bitter was it, harshness, coolness. And so compared to the no cooling agent, people rated the products with menthol as less harsh and more cool. Not surprising. But what is interesting is the synthetic cooling agent products versus the no cooling agent products. People rated those as more smooth, much less harsh, and much more cool. So again, same data, just in graphical format. So synthetic cooling agent in gray, menthol in blue, non-cooling agent in yellow. And this is for harshness and coolness. So we also wanted to understand, all right, so, from these data, we're seeing synthetic cooling agents compared to menthol versus no coolant. These products are being rated, as people like them more, they're more willing to use again, they're more cool. But what about flavor, right? If these are added to fruit versus tobacco, or if I'm an e-cigarette user or a cigarette user, what about the nicotine strength, right? If it's a low nicotine strength or a high nicotine strength, what about the number, like the order in which they were presented, these flavors? Well, none of those had any interactions with our outcome. So meaning it does appear to not matter, right? Whether what type of flavor it's added to or what your tobacco use history may be. And we saw that same consistency for sensory attributes. So again, didn't matter across sweetness by flavor, use status for any of the ratings of harshness, coolness, those types of things. So what does this mean? Well, these findings highlight that WS-23 in this study were more appealing and had more desirable sensory attributes than regular flavors. WS-23 did appear to be superior to menthol in enhancing some desirable sensory attributes. And this may mean that synthetic cooling agents may enhance e-cigarette product appeal and generalize that effect even to tobacco flavors. I think more questions need to be answered about synthetic cooling agents, right? So as you leave this presentation, you're thinking about, future directions, or when you're looking at, you see products on the market and it's like banana ice. So those are the kind of things that we're going to be continuing to study. So, will synthetic cooling agents minimize a menthol restriction policy? Do these agents increase susceptibility to use e-cigarettes? Well, early survey data are showing that young adults who use e-cigarettes with menthol or synthetic cooling agents added vape on more days. They vape more times each day. They report greater nicotine dependence, and they report greater respiratory symptoms. Other emerging e-cigarette data we're seeing, so this is a paper we recently published from data we collected in 2022 among young people in Ohio. We found that of the 460 people we surveyed that were past 30-day e-cigarette users, 51% had reported past 30-day cannabis use. So among those people who were dual using e-cigarettes and cannabis, 80% were using cannabis through multiple means. So that includes smoking, vaping, dabbing, as well as consuming cannabis edibles. And so this is really similar to national data on high school students from 2018, which indicated half of past 30-day e-cigarette users had also vaped cannabis at least once in the past 30 days. So, we really are continuing to study this phenomenon, right? This is a new, the co-use of cannabis is really something new that we're observing among young e-cigarette users. We really do have a lack of understanding about the additive impacts of dual use on the body. There are some missed opportunities for cross knowledge, right? As we learn more information about one substance, does it then tell us more about another substance? And potentially this sheds light on youth tobacco control, may need prevention and intervention efforts that concurrently address cannabis, right? We don't really know why this is happening, but it is important for us to keep an eye on. All right, so summarizing everything we've talked about e-cigarettes. I know we've talked about a lot, but hopefully this puts it together for you. So if you take nothing else away from everything we've discussed about e-cigarettes, I hope I've shown that the e-cigarette marketplace can and does rapidly evolve. These changes often impact youth and young adult use behavior. Young people are really quick to find these new products and adapt to these new products. We have shown that it can increase nicotine dependence. We're still learning about how it impacts toxicant exposure. And marketing techniques can confuse young consumers, right? We talked a little bit about the synthetic versus tobacco derived, or using tobacco free in marketing is confusing to young people. We still need to know more about the co-use of cannabis and e-cigarettes. It makes it really difficult to study, right? As you can see, all the variations of e-cigarettes, cannabis is not that different, right? We have a wide variety of THC strengths, wide variations in the types of products people use. And so, continuing to study it and identifying common terminology will be important. And we're still learning about the potential long-term health effects of e-cigarettes. So new products and product alterations do make it difficult to study, but it likely impacts user behavior and possibly user health. So emergent products to monitor. We're going to talk a little bit about non-medicinal oral nicotine products. So I always like to take some screen grabs so people kind of see the products in which I'm referring to as I'm talking. So we have our nicotine pouches here. We have some nicotine lozenges. We have, nicotine gums here. So a lot of these new oral medicinal nicotine products are emerging on the marketplace, but we really don't know a lot about what young people think about them. And so this study was a study that I conducted with colleagues at the University of Southern California. And we really wanted to examine adolescent willingness to use ONPs and how or if they differed by the type of oral nicotine product or ONP, the type of flavor, and if that was associated with any sociodemographic characteristics. So these data are from an ongoing survey of behavioral health among youth from 11 high schools in Southern California. So we surveyed non-users of tobacco and other nicotine products, and they reported past and a 6-month use of oral nicotine products, sociodemographic characteristics. But the really cool thing about this study is it was an experimental paradigm in which respondents were randomized to either view these oral nicotine products in a mint or a fruit flavor, and then we asked them questions about their willingness to use. And so across the board, regardless of new product type, compared to, thinking back to the traditional smokeless tobacco, we have Skoal here as our example. All these new oral nicotine products, youth were more willing to try. When we look at this by product flavor, we see that youth are more willing to try these products in mint compared to fruit. Younger youth compared to older youth were more willing to try these products. Youth who reported their family finances were, struggling or in poverty compared to youth reporting family finances as well off or average, were more willing to try medicinal ONPs or non-medicinal ONPs. So our next study on ONPs, and then I'll put it all together for you, wanted to do something similar, but with youth in Ohio. So again, we just focused on youth from Ohio, ages 15 to 25, asking about nicotine pouch use among a large sample. And so we also collected demographic characteristics, e-cigarette use, cigarette use, and nicotine pouch use. So on the y-axis, we have the frequency of participants. On the x-axis, we have ever use of nicotine pouches or current use of nicotine pouches. In the red, we have current e-cigarette user or cigarette user, and in the gray, we have non-users. So as you can see here, people who were current e-cigarette or cigarette users, a greater proportion were more likely to have ever used or currently used nicotine pouches. Again, y-axis, we have the frequency of participants. Across the x, we have demographic characteristics and past 30-day e-cigarette use or cigarette use. We broke it up here in this example. And then in the red, we have ever nicotine pouch use. And in gray, we have past 30-day nicotine pouch use. And what we see here is a greater proportion of males versus females were current or ever users of nicotine pouches. And ever nicotine pouch use was more commonly endorsed by e-cigarette and cigarette users compared to non-users. Finally, we wanted to look at, are people who you're using nicotine pouches, right? Is it mostly people under 21, so the legal purchasing age of tobacco, or are these mostly people who can legally purchase these products? What we found is there were no significant differences observed by age and nicotine pouch experimentation or current use. So in summary, in study 1, we found that adolescents were more willing to try ONPs in mint versus fruit flavor. And adolescents who were younger, low income, were more willing to try ONPs compared to traditional smokeless tobacco. In study 2, very similar, mint and menthol were preferred flavors of nicotine pouches, and young adults who were past 30-day users of other tobacco products were more likely to have tried or used nicotine pouches in the past 30 days. So several studies have suggested that nicotine product users are more likely to have used or ever used oral nicotine pouches, so this isn't new, but some studies have shown that young adult e-cigarette users with and without intention to quit, so they're thinking about quitting and they're making a plan, or they're not interested in quitting, are potentially interested in using oral nicotine pouches as a cessation tool. I do think there are a lot of future questions to answer. So, are people really just using ONPs in places where vaping or smoking isn't allowed? Does it change vaping and smoking behaviors, right? Are people trying to reduce on their own? And if flavor restrictions occur for cigarettes or e-cigarettes, do we see increases in oral nicotine product use among young people? So now we're going to switch gears. So I've presented, the how the evolution of all these products and nicotine form and flavors have impacted, user behavior. Now, what can we do about it, right? Well, I am not a cessation expert, but I want to give you all a little homework on the call. This is a really lovely article that details prevention and cessation programs specifically for adolescents. So this is a screenshot of table 1, which just shows the program name, who it's affiliated with, how you provide the format, right? Is it an online game? Is it a school-based education tool? How long it takes, when it was created, and if it's free, which is the main thing. And many of these resources are free to use. In table 2, they highlight cessation programs for adolescents. And so again, the name, who is affiliated with, how you, provide this program, how long you need to expose individuals to the program, as well as if it's free and how you access it, the availability of it. Resources that I'm more familiar with. So the Truth Initiative has a really cool vaping like text to quit program. So youth and young adults interested in quitting e-cigarettes can text ditch vape to 88709. Parents and other adults looking to help young people quit can text quit to 202-899-7550. Information about this specific resource is available through this link. So feel free to take a screenshot or whatever of this slide, as well as the slide before. And then this is the phone here is an example kind of screenshot of what it looks like as you're engaging with the text to quit program. So I hope I've encouraged you to kind of join the conversation, right? This is the theme of the next couple of slides. I think, the work that I've done working with young people who use tobacco products, right? They want to talk about it. They want to learn more about what this is doing, or, how to quit using their products. And so these are some data that a postbac is working with me on. So this is a longitudinal study that we're conducting as part of my Career Development Award. We conduct qualitative interviews with youth or young people who have never used e-cigarettes. And I think this is really interesting because what I've seen is the majority of some of these qualitative components have really been focused on users. Why do you use? Why did you choose to start using? I think sometimes we forget, right? If 20% of youth use e-cigarettes, 80% don't. And so really the goal of the study is capitalizing on those salient protective factors that young people find to help inform our prevention and cessation campaigns. So this graph just shows the thematic findings that we have so far of our baseline qualitative interviews. Most people are indicating they see a lot of negative media content in the form of anti-vaping ads. They're really choosing not to use because they believe that there's a negative health impact associated with using. And about 50% have said that they don't use e-cigarettes because they feel like there's not enough education and there's not enough research being done on this. So here are some actual quotes from the qualitative studies. And so related to anti-vaping posts, they're like, the general message is, don't do it, it can harm you. The majority of participants mentioned that e-cigarettes may have negative health repercussions. So it's toxic to your lungs. It's just a bunch of goop that they're putting in your lungs, and they're addictive and they're carcinogenic. I also love that young people know the word carcinogenic, right? And most young people perceived a lack of research, right? So about half. So they just said there's not enough research being done. So you don't really know what you're doing to your body. People don't really understand the effects of it. This is the same data But I'm incorporating now our youth or young people who currently use e-cigarettes. So we have about 66 people who in the study who do not use, 59% who currently use. And I want to highlight this because, you know, as a clinical psychologist, I'm seeing from these responses that many of these young people, particularly in this study, are reaching to their e-cigarettes to manage negative affect and manage negative emotions and feelings or stress. And so 66% of our respondents believe that their e-cigarettes help them feel better if they've been feeling sad or down. 75% versus 15% of non-users believe e-cigarettes would help them reduce or handle stress, help them manage anger, about 64%, and about 80% almost believe e-cigarettes would make them feel more comfortable at parties. So again, this kind of social anxiety component of using their e-cigarette. We do see similar reflections in national data from the NYTS. So if you don't feel comfortable getting the conversation started, don't worry, there are plenty of resources out there. So the CDC and Surgeon General have websites for e-cigarette information and resources. They're really great websites. They have infographics that you can print off and post. The Truth Initiative is also a wonderful resource. They have fact sheets and tips for starting these conversations. And then the American Lung Association also has a conversation guide, I believe from the parents' perspective, from a physician's perspective, and then, you know, how to get these conversations started. So I think those are really great resources. So we'll wrap up here with future directions and ongoing research. So this is a study I'm really excited about and I'm really proud of. So this is the ICE study, again, trying to understand more about how these synthetic cooling agents impact abuse liability or how people use these products, as well as the toxicant exposure. So we're going to randomize people to vape one of 4 conditions each study session. They're going to answer questions. We're going to collect, they're really going to use the e-cigarette in the lab, and we're going to collect all their puffing behavior. We're going to collect blood to look at nicotine uptake. But the really exciting stuff, in my opinion, comes post-data collection. So I work with some really wonderful and smart chemists and colleagues, and we're going to take the human puffing behavior, we're going to replicate those in the smoking machine, and then we can analyze the e-cigarette aerosol for toxicant exposure and how that varies by your puffing behavior. We're also going to continue to look at synthetic cooling agents and other products. So recently, California enacted a flavor restriction, but tobacco company was ready for that. And so new products recently emerged in the California marketplace that have synthetic cooling agent WS-23 in them. So again, they're non-menthol, but they're providing that cooling sensation. So we're going to continue to look at that. And in summary, so I want to leave some time for questions because I'm really excited to see, I see all kinds of things in the chat and the Q&A, so I'm ready to get into it. All right, what do you take from this presentation? Well, I hope I've shown you that the nicotine marketplace can rapidly evolve and how tobacco regulatory science really aims to identify how these evolutions, changes, and new products impact public health and how we can help as public health researchers and officials. We're still learning about the potential long-term effects of e-cigarettes and other products, new alterations, likely impact user behavior and possibly user health. And I want you guys to reach out, ask questions, start discussions. I think the more we talk about this and the more we collaborate and connect with each other, the more quickly we can find answers and identify new products. Young people are curious. They want to have discussions about these. So I hope I've inspired you to get out there and provided you some knowledge to feel like you really can have a confident conversation about this. And the marketplace is difficult to keep up with, right? It is rapidly shifting. I do this for a living. I love what I do, but it's hard for me to keep up sometimes. And so, public health researchers and officials are a resource. So please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out and get involved. I didn't do any of this by myself. I have a really wonderful team. I have really wonderful colleagues, and I'm very grateful for all the mentorship and people I've worked with over the years. So I have to say a heartfelt thank you to the Center for Tobacco, the James Comprehensive Cancer Center, the OSU T-Corps, the USC T-Corps, the USG research team and Institute for Addiction Science, as well as our funders, the NIH, NCI, NHLBI, FDA, and AHA. So let's ask some questions. I can stop my share. Okay.
Hello, hi, this is Tara Ruckert again. Dr. Tackett, thank you so much for your information and all the work that you've done in this field. We're proud that you're a Kentuckian.
Thanks.
So I want to jump in, and we won't get to all the great questions that we had, but one of the very first ones kind of goes back to your call to action for us of reaching out to young people who are curious. And you mentioned we don't have enough research about the long-term effects of e-cigarettes, but there was our first question what are the effects of vape pens versus regular cigarettes? So kind of what information would you kind of share if you were having a conversation with a young person?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where it gets tricky, right? So, you know, if you think about tobacco products on a harm continuum, right, where combustible cigarettes are, maybe the most harmful product, right, and then maybe nicotine replacement therapy is the least harmful. And so I think sometimes it's hard to explain that variability to young people, right? And so typically how I approach my discussions, in the past when I've talked to students about this or people interested, anything that you put in your lungs, right, isn't going to be good for your body. Young people shouldn't be exposed to nicotine, right? It can harm the developing brain. And so I think sometimes we get caught up in, well, it's less harmful than cigarettes. And it's like, okay, well, let's take all that aside and let's just focus on you as the person, right? Like for you, this isn't a healthy choice, right? You've never smoked, you've expressed that you're addicted to this product and you'd like to quit. Like, let me help you, right? You're putting this in your lungs. Let's help you make healthier choices, right? Is kind of how I frame it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. The next one here I've got, what would you recommend the course of action be for dealing with stores in my community selling to underage consumers?
Yeah, I mean, great question. So there are, so on the FDA's website, there are forms that you can submit that will notify them that a store or a company is selling a product that you believe, I'm going to use loosely here, illegal, right? They're illegally doing something. And so, so you can submit those forms and then that notifies people. They do have research teams that go out and conduct store evaluations of storefronts, of sales teams within vape shops, as well as like commercial gas stations. And so, yeah, I would encourage you to go to the FDA's website and make a complaint. Also reach out to your local, many public health researchers do this type of work. So I work with some colleagues who are currently conducting a study about like proximity and geolocation of sales and underage use. So, identify your public health officials in your community and don't be afraid to email and say, hey, I think this is going on. Is there some way we can check this out?
Wonderful. Thank you. And we might have time for one more, and we're going to share information about the next sessions, which we encourage you to attend in the chat there. But a question about FDA regulations and any movement on FDA regulations. Maybe our synthetic cooling agent is going to be included in that menthol ban.
Yeah, great question. So I just work. So I am not a lawyer, so disclosure here. But we do have some really. That's a wonderful thing about TCOR's team, right? Is we have some really great lawyers that work with our team and identify that. So we are encouraging, the FDA and the Center for Tobacco Products to include, rather than just a characterizing flavor, right, the sensation of cooling, right? But things get difficult. There's also literally today, I got an email from a colleague of a paper that got published that is there's a new type of e-cigarette that has a new manipulation of nicotine. And instead of being like a synthetic nicotine or tobacco derived nicotine, it's this new version. And they're claiming on their website that they're PMTA, which is a pre-market tobacco authorization. They're PMTA exempt, which I don't know, that the things have evolved so quickly. I don't envy the FDA CTP's position, because it is hard to keep up with all these different regulations, all these different manipulations. But yes, we as I will speak for myself. A lot of the work that I've done has tried to encourage the inclusion of synthetic cooling agents in the menthol restriction policy.
Wonderful. Well, I know we didn't get to everyone, but thank you
Yes,
so
I'm so
much
sorry.
for
Yeah.
your wonderful questions. We're going to follow up links in the emails. You'll know how to reach out to us. And I just want to let you know, Dr. Tackett, there were so many thank yous in the Q&A and in the chat. So just thank you everyone today. Thank you so much.